All right, welcome back. So this is the second time that I'm recording this video. I put it out there a little bit earlier, but it got cut off somewhere during the middle. So let's take a look and let's try this again. So today we're going to look at the subsequent voyages by Columbus. So this is part two of our notes from yesterday. Yesterday we looked at kind of the way that the first voyage ended, the entire second voyage, and today we're going to look at and see what the third and fourth voyages of Columbus look like and their legacy. We're essentially wrapping up on Columbus today. Tomorrow will be the official last day of Columbus because I want to get your input. But let's go ahead and get started. So, just as a review, remember that Columbus believes he is in this area right here. This map is, I'm going to readjust a little bit. This map is in two different pieces. What we have on this side, on the right side, is the Eastern world, what is known as the Old World, and what we have on the left side, the Western world or the Western Hemisphere, is what we know as the New World. Again, these two parts of the Earth had been essentially split from each other. They did not have contact with each other, at least civilized, contact, trade, what have you. So this is essentially what Columbus is probably most famous for, is connecting these two parts of the world, not for, finding what he thought was Asia, not for even like discovering America, but essentially for reuniting or uniting for the first time, at least since the land bridge, that these two land masses had been connected in a sense. All right, so let's go ahead and move to our first slide. There we go. I made me a little spot for my face so I don't get tied up in other parts of the presentation. All right. So, desperation of Columbus. As we talked yesterday, Columbus had previously enslaved many of the local natives to search for gold. Like that is his biggest priority, and it is going to become even a larger priority as time goes on. Here's the issue with that. Columbus had been trained by the Portuguese. That's where he learned like all of his, navigatory skills. That's where he learned his sailing skills. And the Portuguese had been practicing slavery for quite some time in Africa. If we remember, the Portuguese are actually sailing around the tip of Africa, the Horn of Africa, in order to get to Asia. Columbus, and is sailing for Spain, is trying to, instead of go around the Horn of Africa, to go straight into the Atlantic Ocean. And again, if the Americas aren't there, which he doesn't know about them, then he should end up in Asia by simply sailing west. The Portuguese, again, had been practicing slavery and enslaving like the populations of Western Africa for several decades at this point, if not for maybe a little bit longer. So Columbus, again, he believes that this is kind of his best bet to make sure that this voyage, this expedition is, venturous, is, because again, he's got people putting money into his expedition. So what he needs to do is he needs to make sure he can pay them back. He needs to make sure that he finds gold. And this is, again, one of the major reasons, the major points of this entire expedition. And this is why King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella first sponsored this voyage in the first place. But as the voyages get bigger, gold becomes much more of a priority because now you have more people involved. You have more money involved. The first voyage, the first expedition was 3 ships. The second one's going to be 17 ships. And again, about 1,200 to 1,500 passengers. And these are farmers. These are soldiers. These are settlers. They are priests. They are wanting to settle in this area, and they want to find a way to make some money. Columbus has to pay these people back, not the people that are not the passengers, but those that have given him money in order to even make this possible. He has to pay them back, and the best way to pay them back is with gold. So again, because Columbus is desperate to pay them back, gold becomes an even bigger priority, which makes the enslavement of the natives. It makes that goal of the enslavement to find gold. Columbus creates a system of laws that require the natives to search for gold in order to pay it to Columbus, so that Columbus can pay it back to his investors. Now, what the enslaved natives had to do is they would be given a quota of gold they would have to fill within a 3-month period. So this made it to where the natives, they are searching for gold on essentially their own islands. And they are given a certain amount that they have to, hand over to Columbus. And if they don't have enough gold, if they hadn't found enough gold, they are punished. Now, there's a lot of different theories as to the punishments. Bartholomew de las Casas. He was actually a Spanish settler in Hispaniola around this time. He said that Columbus, if the natives didn't have enough money, not enough gold, Columbus would chop off their hands and would even sick dogs on them. This is kind of a contested piece of history. Bartholomew de las Casas was not a big Columbus guy. He was not a fan of Columbus. He was very critical of Columbus and the crown of Spain, but the king and queen of Spain. He would write. He was a historian. In being a very controversial historian, many thought that he was, kind of defecting from Spain. Later, he would speak very highly in favor of the English, which the English were the, biggest rival to Spain in the 1500s, which would lead to several actual wars between the two. Bartholomew de las Casas would speak of the atrocities committed by Columbus and his men against the natives, and he called for the freeing of the natives, that they should not be enslaved. Just to show you how controversial a figure that Bartholomew de las Casas is, while he advocated for the release of the natives, he advocated for the enslavement of Africans to then be, sold and sailed across the ocean to the New World to then function as slaves. So he would go on to later, even back down from that point. But it shows you the kind of the volatility and the controversialness of De las Casas. Some historians believe that he may have exaggerated exaggerated his claims in order to make Columbus look bad. Some believe that in order to make Spain look bad. Some believe that he was, simply telling the truth. It's hard to tell, but it's important that it's another reason why it's so important to write things down. The more accounts that you have of something, well, typically the more true you assume it to be. It's not foolproof, but if there's nothing written down or only one account written down, then it paints a narrow view. And can one person be mistaken? Can one person have bias? Yeah, of course. It makes it very important to record and write stuff down. That's how history is collected. So again, with Columbus, we see that there's some shady stuff going on. There's some bad practices going on. It kind of leads us to another question. Is Columbus the one directing this, or is he just kind of just kind of falling victim to his crew? We're going to talk about it here in the third journey. So with the third journey of Columbus, in 1498, he is sailing back to the New World. And this is more so in order to stop the expansion of Portugal than anything. Spain wanted to find the land that the King of Portugal had heard stories about. The King of Portugal had heard stories about a land south of where Columbus had previously explored that had been a hot spot for West African nations, essentially in trade. There, he had heard stories, again, the King of Portugal, that was King John II, he had heard stories of these West African countries, these West African people sailing, again, directly westward and reaching this large landmass. Now, King Ferdinand doesn't know exactly what this landmass is. He assumes that it is probably Asia. not necessarily sure as to what country in Asia, but he assumes that it is Asia. In actuality, it is going to be South America. And this is what Columbus does. He discovers this, he sails to the Caribbean and then sails southward and makes landfall in South America and explores the coast for several months. And we're talking about the coast here. We're talking about like the northeastern coast above Brazil. While Columbus is doing this, he is exploring this area for several months. During this time, Spain had began essentially a program for prisoners to be granted a pardon. So in Hispaniola, predominantly, and in the Caribbean, there is, again, the settlements that they are trying to establish. They're running into some problems. They need more labor. The king and queen of Spain were not in favor of slavery. So instead, what they do is they offer criminals a pardon if they agree to go work in Hispaniola and in the Caribbean islands for a certain amount of time. An example here, if you were subject to the death penalty, if you were going to be executed, you could get pardoned for your crimes, which, again, if you're going to get executed, we got to imagine this is a pretty severe, pretty violent crime, or at least a malice crime. So in order to get your imprisonment and execution pardoned, you had to labor for 2 years in Hispaniola. 2 years. So again, there's prisoners that take advantage of this offer. And this, again, kind of leads us back to this the question as to, is Columbus the one that is directing all of these, poor decisions and bad practices, or is he kind of a victim of it? I'm not saying that, once a criminal, always a criminal. There isn't such thing as forgiveness. But we do have to keep in mind that these are not people that Columbus necessarily trusts. These are not people that Columbus, not saying he doesn't think highly of them, but these are some people that have been in some sketchy things, that have done some. I want to be careful the way I say it, because I don't want to make it sound like I think every prisoner is like a piece of crap, because that's not it. Because I imagine some of them were probably falsely imprisoned. It happens. But again, these aren't like nobles. These aren't people that have a large reputation to uphold. So they have to act by a certain manner. It does kind of poke around at that question as to what was Columbus's role, and it's not one that we really know. So Columbus, while he is searching the South African coast, these prisoners come in to Hispaniola. They begin working, and when Columbus returns to Hispaniola, a rebellion between the Europeans had begun under the governorship of his brother Bartholomew Columbus. Also, Bartholomew and Christopher have another brother named Diego. He is also essentially in this governorship with Bartholomew. Christopher actually regains control of these two rebelling groups within the Europeans, within the Spanish, and the rebels are then hung, but it doesn't change the fact that many of the settlers in Hispaniola are not fans of the Columbus brothers. They look at this as almost like a new monarchy, that you have, the king and, his two brothers who operate as the king in his absence. This is troublesome for, again, these Spanish settlers in Hispaniola, because it essentially makes it a dictatorship. What Columbus and what the Columbus brothers say goes. Now we start to see how these settlers want the Columbus brothers gone. And Christopher Columbus himself is suffering from arthritis. His health is starting to decline. During this time, these Spanish settlers are sending sending letters, notes, something you pass in class, sending letters. They're sending people to testify against Christopher Columbus and his treatment of his own men, the treatment of the natives, and just the poor practices that have been constructed upon Hispaniola. And so he sets back to Spain unknowingly to be arrested in his arrival in Spain. When he arrives in Spain, he is actually shackled, and he and his brothers are then imprisoned. So the Columbus brothers are imprisoned for 6 weeks. And again, this is because of the practices that were going on in Hispaniola, the fact that gold hadn't been found. So King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella, they were more so kind of mad at Columbus because this hadn't been this huge business venture that everyone had set out for. Columbus again is being there's always a rebellion going on. So they do not think he's a good leader. They think that he is kind of ruining this whole, again, I keep saying venture, but that's what it is. This whole venture, this whole expedition in what is the New World and what is the Indies. But 6 weeks into their prison sentence, Christopher Columbus has been pleading with the King and Queen of Spain, especially King Ferdinand, been pleading, saying, I've given up years upon years of my life to focus on these expeditions to find a quicker route to Asia. I found it, even though nobody thought that I would, even though nobody thought that I could. I've dealt with, shady crew members. I've dealt with an unknowing, a native population that we cannot even effectively communicate with. Now, I have found gold. It may not be as much as you think. I have sent for these, missionaries to come and convert the natives to Christianity. I've done everything you've asked of me. After these pleas and after this 6-week period, King Ferdinand actually agrees and releases the Columbus brothers, all Christopher, Bartholomew, and Diego Columbus, and restores the title of Columbus and actually sponsors a 4th voyage. Christopher Columbus apparently has got a silver tongue because, golly, he talked his way out of that one. The purpose of this 4th voyage was for Columbus to circumnavigate the world. What circumnavigate means is to sail around the world. Like circumference. Circumnavigate, you get what navigate is. Circumnavigate around the world. And what's funny is that King Ferdinand tells Columbus, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to sail west like you have been, and I want you to find passage so that you can continuously sail around the world. This would be a monumental feat. You want to talk about bringing glory to Spain. If a Spanish or the Spanish can sponsor somebody to sail around the world, this would be essentially for the first time. This is the greatest accomplishment in human history at this point, probably. So Columbus is told to sail west to find passage, but whatever you do, do not stop in Hispaniola. Do not stop in Hispaniola. We've had too many problems. Do not stop in Hispaniola. That is what Columbus is told by King Ferdinand. So Columbus sets out, and as you would have it, Columbus starts to, because again, being a very established and experienced sailor at this point and captain, feels that there's a hurricane brewing kind of in the Atlantic Ocean near them. So what does Columbus do? He stops at Hispaniola to take shelter. The governor of Hispaniola that had been appointed in his absence wouldn't even let him port. So Columbus and his men have to port on the opposite side of Hispaniola. They survive the hurricane, and then Columbus and his men sail to Central America in order to find passage into open water. So again, they can sail around the world. Central America is in this map right here. These are the countries known as Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. This is important and something I want you to know. This is between Mexico and Colombia, Colombia being like the beginning of South America. Central America, it's just a small little, landmass. It actually wouldn't be until the 1900s where the Panama Canal would be completed, and so like a slice was taken out of Panama, like right here. So sailors could go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean without having to sail all the way around South America. That was a huge, huge development in world trade. Um, Columbus and his men, when they set foot in Central America and began exploring the coastline, he and his men were met with hostility from the natives, so they fled Central America. Their ship was damaged in the fleeing, that they actually had to stop in Jamaica. And not just stop in Jamaica, they actually get stranded in Jamaica. And they'd be stranded in Jamaica for an entire year. All right, let's wrap this up. So, let's see. The last of Columbus. So, while stranded on Jamaica, a rebellion against the Columbus brothers began once more. So every time that we have looked at one of Columbus's journeys, one of Columbus's voyages, there has been a rebellion against him or attempted mutiny against him every single time. What does that say about Columbus? Well, again, it's complicated. What does it say more about Columbus? Does it say more about the crew? I don't know. But it's a question that we have to ask because, again, this isn't just nice and neat in one box that we can just say, okay, Columbus is good, Columbus is bad. It's one or the other. No, it's essentially there's a lot more complicated than that. A lot more complicated. The devil's in the details. So while stranded on Jamaica, a rebellion begins, and Bartholomew Columbus is the one that has to set this rebellion down. In a sword fight, he takes on one of the leaders of this rebelling group, and instead of killing him, instead of slaughtering him, he spares his life, and he does so that he has gained the trust, and essentially kind of like a "you owe me," I could have killed you. So this rebellion and this mutiny is essentially put down, but they're still trying to get off the island. They're still stuck on Jamaica. They're not like boys now. Like this rebelling group and the Columbus brothers aren't boys now, but they are at least somewhat. I don't even want to say friendly. They're just not killing each other. So Columbus and his brothers had pled, I don't know, had plead with the Spanish settlers on Hispaniola to come and save them. They constructed like small canoes, and they actually like set out and like they would send, essentially they're sending messengers to Hispaniola because they need a large ship. They've got 110 people. They need a large ship to get everybody off of Jamaica and back to Hispaniola. Don't go there. That's what Columbus is told, remember? So these pleas are, the governor of the Hispaniola does not want to help Columbus. But after pleas for months, he finally decides to send for Columbus and his men. Again, this tells you how much conflict there was surrounding Columbus and his brothers, because 38 of the 110 surviving members of Columbus's crew decide to stay stranded in Jamaica rather than go with Christopher Columbus and his brothers back to Hispaniola. Again, who does that say more about? Does it say more about the Columbus brothers, or does it say more about the crew? I don't know. It's a good question. Lastly, Columbus returns to Hispaniola, and from there he would return to Spain, and he would never set foot in the New World again. A year and a half upon his arrival back in Spain, Columbus died at the age of 54 in the year 1506. So, Columbus. There's a lot to digest there. Today, you guys are looking at the Columbian Exchange, which is essentially maybe the longest lasting part of Columbus's journey and Columbus's voyages. So you guys check that out, that assignment, Columbian Exchange, answer a few questions. And then tomorrow, I'm gonna ask you guys about kind of your opinions and, I want you to give me some evidence behind the legacy of Columbus, because again, this is something that is still debated upon today, especially every year near Columbus Day. And, what is his legacy? Should Columbus be celebrated? Should he be chastised? What should happen to Christopher Columbus in history's sake or for history's sake. So, a little bit more opinionated tomorrow, but I just want to get kind of your ideas because, again, this is something that we have to be critical of, but also we have to, kind of be appreciative of at the same time. It's tough. It's tough. All right. So I appreciate you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Now let's close this out. This is always the hard part. Oh, there we go. There we go. Pause.